Welcome back to Word Blindness, Dyslexia Exposed. I am Julianne Hahn here with my co-host Brent Sopel. How are you?
Ho, 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 ho. The branches on the tree go shake, shake, shake.
And now you're hitting.
Long.
Yeah, remember this is coming out after Christmas, but so we are. Yes, we are recording before Christmas. Yeah. And we have another special guest, Colleen Coppola. How are you?
Good. How are you? Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. I know. So
can't believe she got up this early just for us.
I know. So we are recording Christmas Eve, which is big. But Colleen, we have, as we'll dive into this, there's so many different tentacles and octopus legs and whatever you want to say here. I just gave not the best scenario, but I want to kind of preface because Colleen and I were connected.
Don't Italians do like the 12 fishes?
That is actually, I never did that before, but that is on my bucket list for when I have a family of my own.
Families are overrated, trust me.
I'm sorry.
Families are overrated. Nothing but drama.
Yeah, true.
Drunk and the gay uncle in the corner.
I have to say another thing that I know we just talked about Dan Hahn being the most amazing human. Yes. He actually does Christmas Eve and he does the 7 fishes.
Oh, he does.
It's not the 12 fishes, it's the 7 fishes.
What are the 7 fishes?
You can make it's whatever fishes you want, I think, but maybe not. Well, so I'm going to preference
fishes?
Again.
Is it fish or fishes?
Fishes. 7 fishes.
How do you spell that?
More than one fish.
We're not having a spelling bee here. The other thing is that Dan grew up in the Bronx in a neighborhood that it was very Italian. So we call him a fake Italian because he's German Irish. And my mom was like, you do the 7 fishes, but because of but my mom is half Italian. So, and we didn't.
And you're Jewish.
And we didn't really do. People will ask me. I'm like, no, I'm Christian. So, yes, we're a hodgepodge of everything. Anyways,
are you a gypsy too?
I probably am a gypsy. There's a lot of stuff in there, right? Brent is in rare form, as we can all feel, and poor Colleen, but she's been listening to the podcast since it came out because again, we were connected years and years ago. I don't remember how. I know it was our friend Colette connected us, and then we were talking about something, and I think I said, "Oh, don't mind my spelling. I'm dyslexic," and you're like, "Wait, I'm dyslexic," and then it was kind of this whole, "Oh my gosh!" And I was in it with Montgomery,
and I remember that.
And it was before I even had, met Brent, but you have been one of the people that I've said I wanted to get on the podcast because I watched you through your journey at High Point. And then Brent was always, and he says this on the podcast a lot, I've never really met a teacher with dyslexia with the 5 Ds that goes into teaching. And I was like, oh my God, no, wait, I have someone.
I should probably apologize because, I rip on teachers a lot. But,
as you should, because there's not many teachers with a specific learning disability. And there's not many teachers who understand what it's like to have dyslexia, to have ADHD, to have anxiety, depression, to have all those things. There's not many teachers like that. I think I only had one teacher throughout my whole education experience that had dyslexia. And her name was Miss Kryl. She taught at Winston Prep. She was an alum of Winston Prep, and she had dyslexia.
So how many teachers do you, since you're young in your path, that obviously you just said you had one, but do you know of anyone that you're working with now or that you went to school with during your journey that is dyslexic too?
That's a very good question. I had one student in my class at High Point. He was dyslexic and he went into teaching. But as I'm thinking about it, I don't think so. I have many friends who went into teaching who they thought they had a reading disability, or they say they're dyslexic, but they're really not.
Oh yeah.
And then, and that's when I cringe too, because it's like, no, you're not. Like, don't make it as an excuse. Like, just because you miss a word in a sentence doesn't automatically mean, boom, I'm dyslexic. But it's like, no, you have to have you have to go through the process. You have to, have a, neuropsych evaluation. You have to do all of that before you say, boom, I'm dyslexic, because the accommodations are not handed to you. They're not. Mm-hmm. And they shouldn't be. You have to go through the process like everybody else.
So Colleen, I mean, I think there's so much so much that we want to kind of dive in with you. I mean, the fact that you went into teaching, we're going to go down that path. But if you can take us through a little bit of when you were diagnosed and that path, like if you remember struggling early, because I mean, you were young.
So how old are you now? Let's preface.
I'm 24. I just turned 24 on December 8th.
Oh, well,
that's right. Happy birthday.
That's not Capricorn, is it?
I'm a Sagittarius.
No, I got my birthday in 2 weeks. So her and I
happy early birthday.
Her and I are the same people.
We're Capricorns.
I like Capricorns though. I think I'm a Capricorn moon. I have the app Co-Star.
Oh, I love that.
Oh boy, here you go.
Because I love all of this stuff. I love all this. I love all this, and I always will send him
comes
stuff.
On here, we got magnetic force coming from Ipto over there, so this is going on in the universe. I'm like, I don't know.
I do. If he's having a bad, I'll be like, oh, I just want to tell you, there's a lot of stuff happening in the universe right now, and he's like, I don't care.
There's some science behind that, though. There
100%.
Really is. Yeah, and I think
To me, I have a hard enough time in my life outside myself.
That you don't want to know what's going on.
Yeah, I can't figure anything else out. So
yeah,
I'll leave it up to Juliet.
Right, I'll send him those little clips. So we'll rein everyone back in. Yes. When did you get diagnosed, and do you have like kind of recollections of that?
Why
time?
Teaching?
Okay. So I was diagnosed at the age of 6 years old when I was at a Yonkers public school, and I was in I believe it's an ICT class where there was the general education teacher and the special education teacher. And the special education teacher that I had at the time, her name was Mrs. Weinstein. She was, an older lady, but she had a lot of knowledge and passion. She didn't come across like that, to be honest with you, but I remember her telling my parents, or my parents telling me that there's something wrong.
What was an ICS class?
An ICT class. It's when the special education teacher and the general education teacher.
It's a New York term.
Okay, that's why I said. Excuse me,
that's right.
It's a New York.
You guys are on a whole different island there.
Yeah, so. I know. Yeah, okay. It's an integrated class, but so it can be like a dual teaching.
They do have them in Illinois now. I don't know about Canada. So some of these terms, and in this kind of preface that I don't mean to, is that a lot of these states have different terms.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked that explanation, because this might be a different term in South Carolina or in Alaska or wherever they might be listening, so that they have an understanding of what those ICT words are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, because when I was studying in North Carolina, their terms were different than New York. So then I was like, oh, wait, this is like kind of the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting.
So I was in the ICT class, and they said to my parents, like, look, she needs to be tested. I had a hard time focusing in class. I could never spell. It was just, I had a hard time reading. I was always on the lowest reading level you can imagine. So my parents were like, okay, she needs to go be tested. So I was tested at the age of 6, and, they found out I was dyslexic, and that was through Mrs. Silverstein. She was like I guess she was an education like psychologist or something. So she tested me. But anytime I would go there, she would give me candy at the end. So I remember being like, oh, wait, she's fun. Like, she would give me these weird evaluations and these weird tests, but I got candy at the end. I was kind of like looking forward to it in a sense, because I got candy at the end.
Right.
I still try and find that candy at the end now, too.
So I remember going to her office in Scarsdale, and I remember being tested a couple of times, but I never understood.
He has so much candy.
I love it. And I remember going to her office in Scarsdale, and I remember, being tested and all this other stuff. And then but like, it's funny. My parents never really told me when I was dyslexic. That's a story that should be said. But I was second grade. I was in the same type of classroom, ICT. And then it was in the third grade, the Yonkers Public School District, they did away with the ICT classrooms. So now everybody was in general ed, and I was in a classroom with like 28 people. And it just didn't work out for the year. It was an awful year. The teachers really didn't understand me because there was so many kids. There was.
They got rid of the special ed teacher in that ICT.
Yes, so I had to be pulled out now. So now I had the special ed teacher coming in. She was pulling me in and out.
Okay.
And that really wasn't great for my learning style. And my parents were like, oh my goodness, she needs to go find another school. And then I was sort of searching for the school process in Westchester County. It was kind of awful because there was not many private schools for students with learning differences at the time, and there was only one, and it was called the Windward School. They're now in the city now. They're in White Plains and all this other stuff.
Not Garden City.
What? A lot of the
Yeah.
Not Garden. I lived in Garden City, so
yeah, no, there was no, but I mean, that's a Windward, right? It's in White Plains and in the city. And that was one of the kind of first ones that were just strictly for
dyslexia. Mm-hmm. I remember touring the school, but unfortunately they told me that I was quote unquote too dyslexic to go there. And they said that they couldn't. Yeah. And they said that I couldn't really learn from there or keep up with their academics. And then looking back, what they told my parents, and as a teacher now, whoa. You're school for kids with dyslexia, and now you're saying that I'm too dyslexic to go there? Like,
because they don't give us. Now let me go on my rant. They don't give a fuck. They didn't give a fuck about you, Colleen. No. You had to fit to their mold to make their money. And this is where I get mad, where I get mad at teachers. We all deserve it. We're too dyslexic because we don't meet your business plan. You don't give a fuck about us.
Yeah, speaking of money, the school back then cost like, I don't know, $45,000 to $50,000, which is outrageous. Back in 2009, that's a shit ton of money. And my parents, they were obviously going to sue the Yonkers Public School Districts. And then my mom and I were just having this conversation when I was looking at teaching jobs, and Windward was one of the applicants. And then, they were like, going back, like they didn't think Yonkers was going to pay them and like all this other stuff. Because a lot of people that went to that fancy dyslexia school were from Greenwich. They were from Rye. They were from Bronxville. They were, from these very wealthy areas in Westchester. Why couldn't you help somebody from Yonkers who is, dyslexic, who, it just all didn't make sense. And it's obviously these schools at the end of the day, they are very greedy. They cost them, so much money to go there. And then you're saying that you can't even help a child who's too dyslexic to go there. Like if your mission is to help those with dyslexia, then why are you not? Like it just doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up. And Colleen, and I don't know if I ever shared the story with you because that was one of the schools that we looked at for Montgomery when we were in Connecticut.
Oh, really?
And he, because of his dyscalculia, they're like, we don't have a space for him. And I was like, okay, what are you talking about? Like, it's supposed to be a learning. Yeah. And then he got into the Southport school, and he actually much rather the Southport school because he liked, it was just more free and it wasn't as like structured. He had a number of friends that went to Windward though, because where we were in Connecticut, it was like, oh, Windward's like the Harvard. Why wouldn't you go there? And I was like, no, I'm not going to go to a place that says, okay, they don't have a space for all of his learning disabilities. It doesn't make any sense. And then later they were like, oh, we found a space. And we were like, no, forget it. It's like
Connecticut has a lot of schools too. You have Eagle Hill, you have, I forget, there's another one, but
yeah. Well, so Southport School used to be called Eagle Hill. So Eagle Hill and Greenwich, but they're not the same school. It was very confusing. So Southport is a very small, it's like only 100 kids all together. And it's not just dyslexia. It's also ADHD. So it's mixed. Like with Windward, it was like you only had to, but they don't have behavior problems. It's really just strictly learning. It's if someone learns differently. Eagle Hill and Greenwich, they took also kids that maybe had some like learning, but also some behavior stuff. And so we actually decided to go to Southport because it was smaller and Montgomery didn't have behavior stuff, and it just made sense. Yeah. And Windward didn't have any sports. That's the other thing is like Southport had sports.
Oh, so really?
Yeah, they didn't have any sports. So there was no like that camaraderie. I didn't know. I just didn't say that.
It's so much
camaraderie. I can't say that word. Yeah.
So much bullshit when it comes to this, to your point is, so how many of those schools are ran by non-dyslexics? Juliet, we talked to some parents from, it was a prep school. So 95,000 boarding school, $95,000.
It was,
high school.
Was that in Mass?
No, that was New York.
New York. It was New York. Yeah.
Of course it was in New York.
Upstate.
It was upstate.
It was upstate.
But that wasn't strictly dyslexia. But yes,
No,
but that's still. But they
that
took
was a boarding school, prep school, or whatever whatever that right terminology is, for learning disorders, ran by a non-dyslexic. So we got in touch with them. They pulled the hockey program. No self-esteem, right? You talk about there. The other thing to add to that, there's no high school, right? None of these schools have high school because they don't give a fuck about your kid because they don't want to deal with
There's
the
a
high
story
school
behind
kids.
that too that I would like to unwrap.
Yeah. Oh, please unwrap
Please, all
away.
day long. And this is, I get these calls all the time. What do I do? I got my kids. Let's just use it. As in the Southport. Now, do I put him back in public school? Where do I go? What do I do? He's just getting comfortable. Then I got to take him away. But you go ahead.
Yeah. So Windward didn't work out. So my parents were like, oh my goodness, we got to find another school. So I don't know how we found out about this. It's like a whole different story. So my mom's friend at the time belonged to St. Joe's in Bronxville. And she saw an ad for the John Carnell O'Connor School in Irvington. It's a private Catholic school for students with learning differences. So my parents, they applied. We went, I toured, and they're like, we'll take her. So obviously the Yonkers public schools weren't working out. I'm Catholic. I didn't have to go to CCD in the afternoon. So my parents were like, great, we'll send her there.
Right.
So in the 4th grade, I started at John Carnell O'Connor School. And I really didn't want to go there because when you're at a public school from K to 3, all your friends are there. Change is hard. And I really didn't want to go. But in order to meet my learning style, I had to go. And by the time of this, I didn't know I was dyslexic. I had no idea. My parents didn't tell me. I didn't even know why I was changing schools. They just said it was.
Tell you?
No.
What did they say? What was the terminology that they used to you? That way, are you just learn differently, or you're just different, or what would they say?
They just said because of the class sizes were too big, and which they were. So I was kind of going along with it. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm going to listen to mom and dad.
Because I had to. Anyway, so it was in the 4th grade there. And, it was rough because there was bullying was going on. And there was a lot of these girls that were treating the new girl like shit. And it was just it was awful, absolutely awful. And, but anyway, things just got better. And then I went to 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. But throughout those years at JCOS, it was kind of a lot. I had friends come in and out of my life, and then I never really had a steady friend group. So here's the time when it comes to applying to high schools. So obviously in Westchester County, it's very cliquey. It's very especially with the private schools too, and especially with the private Catholic schools, might I add. So if you want to apply to these private schools, you have a little social clique. So you automatically have that. And that's something I didn't have at DeCharo, PS8, and I didn't have that at John Carnell O'Connor. So great. I get to rebrand myself when I'm applying to all these Catholic high schools. I applied to Ursuline, which I really didn't like. It's a newer show. It's, I was not really sold on it.
My sister-in-law went there, yeah.
Oh, really? Yeah. And then I applied to Holy Child, where Colette went in Rye. I fell in love with the school. It was small class sizes, just this cool clique. It was an all-girls school. I was looking to make friends because I didn't have a lot of friends at the time. And I remember going to their 7th grade look ahead, and, they had a learning support program, and they had all these things, and it went great. I went for an interview, and the person who interviewed me was an alum. She knew Colette, and it just felt it felt great. It felt like I could go here, even though it was this college prep school. They had the help. She told me she could see me in the halls of Holy Child and all this other stuff. And then I didn't get in because I couldn't keep up with their academics. It's they kind of big promised me in a sense, because it was they had said all these things. They said they could see me in the halls. We didn't need financial assistance. It was just all these things. And I was heartbroken for the whole year, heartbroken because I struggled to make friends my freshman year of high school. It was just a rough time. And I thought this place was going to be so great, fit me. I was going to make friends. I was going to get along with the boys from Fordham Prep. I was going to, be part of this social clique that I never had. And I was just feeling so disappointed. So then my parents were like, shit, we have to find you a high school because John Carnell O'Connor only went up to 8th grade. And it's what the hell do you do? So then that's how Winston Prep came along, where I went into the city. I didn't want to commute into the city it was rough. I had to take the Metro North from Bronxville. Then I had to get on a subway. You're asking a 14-year-old to get on a New York City subway whose only I knew was Westchester County.
Right.
It's a lot. And I was still so young. And I remember thinking I don't know how the hell I'm going to do this, but I just had to because the Yonkers Public School District couldn't help me. I didn't get into Holy Child. It was this was my last hope. And I kind of fell into it and I kind of had to do it. Because this is what I have to do because of my
What age did your parents tell you the dyslexia portion?
Oh, so they told me, so this is going to be funny. So I was a big Disney kid growing up. I don't know if you ever seen the commercials for Bella Thorne and how she says she's dyslexic.
Okay, no, I don't think I do.
Did Montgomery ever watch Shake It Up?
No. Shake It Up.
No, we weren't. Yeah, we were PBS. We weren't Disney. Yeah. Your kids watched that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we weren't Disney.
So there was this commercial about Bella Thorne saying that she was dyslexic, and then I just asked my mom one day, "Am I dyslexic?" And she was like, "Yes." And I was like, "What?"
Now, because I'm loving where this is going, but are either of your parents dyslexic?
That's the funny thing. So my mom says she is, but she was never tested. My dad, he says I love Taylor Swift, and I went to her concert back in Boston, and it said Taylor Swift the Eras Tour, and my dad goes, "Oh, Taylor Swift the Eras Tour," and I'm like, "No, it's Eras." Some of the things he says, I'm like, "I think you're dyslexic, Dad," and it's more common in males than it is in females, so I kind of think he is, but then my mom says she is.
Right.
I hear that every once in a while. It's more common in females.
Males.
And there's males and females. Julia, do you know what that percentage is? Because I don't see it.
I think it's equal now, honestly.
Yeah. I think it's misdiagnosed, just like ADHD with females.
That's where I was going to go with it.
And I think females just fall under the radar. They, unless you present
you guys
as a
have
boy.
an attitude, and you're just mean, and you're just being the mean girls, and right?
No, see, Colleen and I were not mean girls. That's the thing.
I was never a mean girl.
I was never a mean girl.
I didn't have that in my body, and
no, I was never a mean girl either. I was nice to everyone. Yeah, I was just kind of floated
even
around.
If I didn't really like you, I was still kind to you.
I didn't cause shit. And I was actually very fortunate. I had a group of girls that were very similar to me, that we kind of we all played sports and hung out and were nice to really everyone. And so we kind of we're just there. But with that being said, so that's how you found out. And it was what was your thoughts?
Were you I got to look up this commercial.
Yeah. It was on. Yeah. I found out, I was like, oh, I am. I didn't really think of it as, I was like, oh, I wish somebody had told me. It was very an emotional experience.
Right.
Because that's in the 4th grade, I started at this new school, and it was truly, I was it kind of a light bulb went off in a sense, but it was also very emotional, hard for me to digest that I have this learning issue and it's not fixed. It's just going to be a part of me for the rest of my life, no matter how much tutoring I do, how much those private schools I went to, no matter how many accommodations I get, this is going to be with me for the rest of my life. And that's what I couldn't digest. Yeah.
Now, if you look back, obviously the process of picking school, finding schools, because I always say knowledge is powerful. Everybody talks, I don't want to get my kid tested, the label. I'm like, no, it's a roadmap for your kid's life. So your knowledge. Do you think if you had heard the word earlier than, when you did, grade 2, grade 3, would have that process started earlier? Would have been a little bit easier for you, knowing that you had that, you were diagnosed, your parents weren't fully coming out. Do you think it would have been a little bit easier knowing that at a younger age to digest it earlier?
I think so, but I feel like I wouldn't understand what it was. I feel like it would be hard for me to process too. But then as I started getting my early years on and my later years on at John Carl O'Connor, I remember my mom came in during my recess time to go over the math homework with my math teacher. And my mom's like, "Don't worry, Colleen, I have this," and this being dyslexia, but it's no, lady, you don't. You weren't diagnosed. You don't understand. Here you are at my recess time coming in to go over math. Meanwhile, a couple more hours, we're going to sit in the dining room table for an hour and a half with my dad going over the math homework.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
hard.
We've got a little checklist, Juliana, how many the fake dyslexics come out.
Yeah.
As we talk, as we do events, or we're talking with people, like our list just, oh yeah, I'm dyslexic. No, you're not. No,
Like
you're
I
not.
have proof. I have everything. I have a neurologist. What is it? A
Neurologist, yeah.
evaluation. I went to Winston Prep. Like I'm the definition of dyslexic. You just look it up. Like Google Images, my face comes up, and then it's Juliet's, and then it's Prep.
Right.
I just laugh because for me is I can tell how they say things or they do certain things. I know you're dyslexic. I can see you miles away. So I don't need, you don't even have to give me your neuropsych. I don't need your neuropsych because you don't have one because, we operate differently. That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Plain and simple.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Right. 100%. Okay. So then Winston Prep came about.
Yes.
And
so
how did that? Yeah.
So I was, I really didn't want to go in the beginning because yet again, it's this constant label of a school for kids with learning differences. When you look it up on Google, that's where I went. And that's what I had a hard time swallowing, that if I went to Holy Child, I would have been seen like everybody else. I would have been in an all-girls school with a cute little skirt. I would have, just like, I just would have like, this is how shallow I was back then. Like, I just, I would have fit the mold. And then when I went to Winston Prep, I didn't, I didn't fit, the mold. Like here I am back to a school with learning differences. They're going to see me as somebody that's dyslexic and all this other stuff. And I just was like, no, like I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do the commute. There was a lot of kids from the city, barely anybody from Westchester. They would like make fun of me in the sense because I'm not a New Yorker, because apparently I didn't live in the 5 boroughs. Like, okay. Like I take the subway every day, but I'm still not a New Yorker.
Right. Totally. It's such a thing. It's so true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that growing up from Westchester, that you're really not considered a New Yorker.
Right.
So,
you're fake.
Yeah, at that point, yeah. So anyway, the first year went by and I made, a couple of friends and I hung out with a couple of girls, but it was never like I didn't start going to high school parties. I didn't go to one after my whole high school career. My first actual kind of party was my freshman year in college at High Point. So, I just felt so behind. I still felt like I was just this girl with the learning differences with my whole life in high school for that whole 4 years.
And did you always call it learning differences or disorders?
I say learning difference because you just learn differently.
See, Brent says disorder because he likes to get people to stop. Because when you say disorder, because there's so many terms, right? I think, Colleen, I shared with you, like, we call it the 5 Ds because like neurodiversity makes me twitch when people say that. I'm like, okay, not that there's anything wrong with neurodiversity, but like, it's not, we're dyslexic. It's a very different thing. And so there are so many things, but Brent he loves to say disorders because people will stop and be like, wait, I thought it was a learning difference. I say learning difference as well, because I'm like, you learn different. I think it makes, and you do.
And you're right. They're both 100%. We do learn differently. I just say disorders because that gets people to stop. And we don't get enough attention brought to us. That's why I'm a neurodivergent. If you Google that, it was obviously found by a lady from Autistic, 1999, Julie Springer. She's an activist, autism activist. So she tagged the line, right? Autism gets all the attention. Every attention. They've got the money. They get all of this. We don't. So why are we falling under the same umbrella? I don't want to fall in the same umbrella. We don't get enough attention. So I do a lot of my stuff for, yes, am I funny? Am I crazy? I'm 6 going on 7 here. I'm turning 7 in January. But I get people to stop, because how do you get people to stop and listen to you? How do if I say learning, difference, it doesn't stop people. Unfortunately, this is the way the world is. And so that's why I do it. So I was just curious why you said, difference rather than disorder.
Yeah. Because I don't like to say disability either, because then it's like you're not disabled to learn. Because I am learning. Every day I'm learning. Even from the minute I was diagnosed, before I was diagnosed, I was always still learning, and so that first year of Winston Prep, it was an adjustment. The commute itself was like a science, and so
how long did that take? How many hours? And take an hour?
Well, it took me an hour and a half. So I would get up, I would take the 7:23 train from Bronxville, and then I would take the 4 or the 5 downtown in Union Square.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the city in itself, like, I just couldn't believe I was going to school in New York City. You're making a 14-year-old, like, but it taught me a lot about independence.
I was going to say it probably really gave you, I mean, that's one of the things, with dyslexia, I think in general, we are just more with it when it comes to figuring things out, because you have to figure everything out. But like Montgomery took the train when he was in 4th grade, 4 stops up to, I think it was 3 stops, and he went up by himself because I had 2 young kids that were sleeping. So like he would get, I would rush him out when the other kids were sleeping to the train station, drop him off, and then get back home because Dan was already in the city.
You just opened a can of worms. You left your kids at home?
I did.
By themselves?
Wait, where was this? Was this in...
This is when we were in Connecticut. It was right up the street, but yeah, I was like, in the beginning.
Wow.
So if Montgomery was in 4th, Truman was in 2nd.
So he took
the
MTA, the red line.
So he took whatever the Connecticut train. I want to say maybe it's the Metro. I'm actually
Metro
like blanking.
North.
Yeah, I think it's a Metro North.
In the 4th grade.
So he took it by himself.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but the thing that was crazy, I remember one time he came home and he's like, "Mom, I saw someone do cocaine," and I was like, "I'm sorry." I was like, "Okay, I have a lot of questions here." How do you know
what cocaine was?
Well, I go, how do you know that was cocaine? This is probably when he was like in 5th grade, and he's like, well, I saw him doing something up his nose, and I asked Ryan because all the kids were older. So, this was it was like a lot of the prep school kids took this. So there was a lot. Basically, there was, and I'm not going to name the prep school, but there was a little group that did a lot of drugs before they went to high school.
I love it.
I know he would love this.
I wish I could do that.
Holy moly.
And so the things that he was sometimes, and he'd be like, "Mom, I learned this." And I'd be like, "Oh my God. Okay. Dan, can you have a conversation with them?" Because he just told me like a sex term that he learned on the train. So but I was also like, okay, I knew this was going to happen a lot of times on the bus, right? School bus, kids come home that are with older kids, you learn this thing. So we would have conversations about it though. Like I would make sure, one of my things was, because that was like early phones. He only had a flip phone because we weren't getting him a phone earlier. I actually was like, no, I'll call the school. And Dan's like, okay, you're going to just put him on the train and then call the school to make sure he got there. And I was like, I mean, back in the day, we didn't have phones. Yeah. I wasn't like, I'm not a helicopter. I trusted that he would be able to get there. But it was like really interesting because we're like, okay, Dan's like, we'll get him a flip phone. But I would say to him, like, I don't want you sitting. I'm not getting you like, the kids are all on the phone, on their phones. Like, you guys need to talk. Like, so it, like, there was a lot of things.
That was back then. It's even worse now.
Oh, it was, yeah, totally. Yeah. The kids would all be on. I mean, that's one thing he said. He's like, Mom, I'm so glad I had a flip phone because I made the other kids be like, no, don't get on the phone. I have no one to talk to. So he would just like talk to the older kids. I mean, and then, witness. So yeah, the school actually got involved because I was like, I feel like I need to tell someone that there was kids doing cocaine on the train.
You told?
No, I didn't tell. I told the school. I said, I think that there was some drug stuff.
This is in Connecticut as I'm thinking back.
Yeah. Okay. So we told our kids they can't go in the same car as the kids doing the cocaine.
What time was this?
Really?
Is this like at 8 a.m.?
Earlier, he was up.
Don't discriminate.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I know, and right. I mean, and these were prep school kids that were going. Yeah, I won't. I don't even actually. I know the school's name, but yeah, it was an interesting thing. But I called Southport because they actually had asked, like, if the kids are ever going, you just need to keep us in the loop. So I did. I was like, I feel like I'm not going to name any names because we didn't know who the kids were, but our kids had to go. They're like, don't go on car 4. Go on, the other. But Montgomery had to wear a suit. Like he had to wear a suit to school with the tie.
Did he have a zipper tie?
No.
No zipper tie?
No, Dan.
My younger years and playing hockey, old zipper tie.
Yeah, no, Dan actually he would put all the ties because I still can't do a tie. And he would hang them on Montgomery's like door handle. But we were like in the beginning, I'm like, I have to leave the kids. I mean, it was a little stressful, but they'd be sleeping. It was literally 2 minutes down the road and I would go, but if like, people would park in the middle. I used to get into fights in the parking lot of the train station because I'm like, hey, your car's parked right in the middle. I can't get out. Guess what? The world doesn't fucking revolve around you, you asshole. I would jump out in my pajamas and I would yell at people. I have to get home to my kids. I have kids sleeping.
I
and
got
they would
kids sleeping. I'm an asshole mom, so move your car. But it's amazing. Like my dyslexic daughter, I would have dropped her off. I mean, I'm in Chicago, O'Hare Airport when she was 6. I would have dropped her off at the curb and I would have driven off and I wouldn't even second guess that she wouldn't get on that plane.
Yeah, you didn't do this, but you were saying if you did.
No, I didn't do this.
Right.
I would have no problem.
Right.
Then I've got my, Jake, who I think I was walking him hand in hand when he's 17, non-dyslexic. He couldn't even get it. He's 17. He's got a license. He's driving a car. I wouldn't drop him off at the curb.
Yeah.
18, I wouldn't have dropped him off the curbs. I don't think because he wouldn't have found it. So it's quite amazing how creative we are in finding ways around things. Independence, clearly not book smart, but street smart, savvy, understand feelings and emotions and where to go and what to do. It's pretty crazy how different we are in that aspect compared to a non-dyslexic.
Yes.
Yeah, but that is, and so I know we just went on a whole rampage on that, but it is, you learn so much independence and that you can figure it. I mean, I'm sure you got a big confidence in yourself figuring out how to get into the city and do that commute. So an hour and a half, and then you would get to school. And I'm sure there's times where the train was delayed. I know there were so many times with Montgomery it would be delayed. One time they got off at the wrong stop or something because they weren't paying attention. I mean, there's a bunch of attention deficit kids. They got off at the wrong stop, or no, the train broke down and they had to get off at the wrong stop. He calls, he's like, we're fine. And I was like, all right. Like I trusted in his ability to figure it out. And I'm like, I can't get there and do it. So was there any times that you can remember that were like a shit show that you had to figure it out on your own?
Yes. So actually, in the beginning part when I went to school, my freshman year in the city, my uncle came with me to the city, and because he was born and raised in the city, it's my mom's uncle. So it's my grandma's brother-in-law. So he was like my great uncle at the time. So he grew up in Manhattan and he took me around on the subway. So he did that from September to like mid-October. And like I was like 14, like I was a teenager at the time. So like I didn't want my uncle coming with me no more to like the commute. Like I want to do this by myself. Like I have like some kids, bullying me because I'm not a New Yorker. And I'm like, let me just, that's all about being dyslexic. I love to prove people wrong. So I'm like, you know what? I don't need him. I'm fine. Let me do this on my own. So my mom's like, okay. So I did my first commute on my own, taking the Metro North, like from Bronxville to Grand Central. That's easy. But then getting on the subway, I got on the subway, and then but the 14th stop, it wasn't stopping there. The express wasn't going, and it was my first time. So I was like, oh shoot. And then I had to take the local. And I got off at the wrong stop. I never forget. I was like, oh my goodness, this is not my stop or whatever. But then I saw a girl that I was familiar with in high school. I was like, oh, Michelle, like, oh my goodness, you go to Winston Prep. She's like, yeah. She's like, dude, there's so many problems at the Union Square station. It wasn't the Express. It was like, I was like freaking out. She's like, no, Colleen, we'll walk to school together. It's fine. I mean, meanwhile, we were late. I was like, oh my goodness, like here I am, a new student. I'm going to be late. This is my first time going to the commute. She's like, no, Colleen, I'm here to help you. So, that was like I got to see a friendly face and I was familiar with it. But that was my first time going to the city by myself. And of course, the subways were like all screwed up. You have all the homeless people around you. You have like so many performers and all this other stuff. And it was like, I'll never forget that. But, I had to figure it out. I had to do this on my own, and then luckily I saw a familiar face that I went to school with. And luckily the beauty of Winston Prep that it was small. So you were familiar with everyone. So let's just say, you were on the subway. Hey, I know that person from So.
Yeah.
New Yorkers, no, like see a farm that's far away with no running water. That's where you find me.
That's what he loves.
And I respect that, though. That's refreshing. That really is.
Yeah.
When I grew up, I grew up in Canada, and that's where, a lot of this, I didn't find out I was dyslexic until I was 32. I never heard, and I didn't hear the word. That was the first time I've ever heard the word.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I shouldn't say that. You know, I probably heard it somewhere else, but never processed it. Never like it wasn't at school. So maybe you know, the Bell Thorne commercial. I probably heard it. You know, I probably heard it there. Right?
You're gonna look it up, right? You're gonna look it up and be like, "Holy shit!"
Right, my kids, you know.
If you can't find it, I'll send it to you.
All right, no, I got to check this out because they definitely watched that.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what. I didn't even process the word. Didn't even know what it was in here when you know. So where I came from, where I grew up, there was no understanding, and there still isn't in Canada. The one lady I knew, she was going to get tested through the school. They said it'd be 5 years.
Yeah.
Crazy. So she was in, I want to say it was grade 2. So, you know, wait 5 years. So she's going to be in grade 7 before you test her.
Oh my God. At that point, they're in high school.
Right.
Holy
shit. It's that in itself. I mean, that's why it's, you know, the foundation and just bringing awareness, and then all of the different aspects of once you get diagnosed, like what is the next step? How do you get diagnosed? All this education.
Why'd you pick education after all this, you know, drama that's gone through trying to find schools and find that group and find that why education?
Okay. So in the kindergarten, I wanted to become a dentist. I don't know why. And also with my dyslexia too, I was very sensory orientated. So I went through so many dentists in my life. I was kicked out of a couple of dentists because I just couldn't handle it.
Really?
So, and I
just sat in the chair for 3 hours yesterday. We got to bring one.
Poor thing.
Yeah, that's why we were supposed to do it yesterday. But everybody was like, "Yeah, he was in the."
That was my fault because I got no teeth that are real. They're all, you know, hockey and it's actually, you know, all my fillings. I had every filling in every teeth too. Back in the day, it was all the silver. Once I changed, the dentist said I should change it all to matching the white. Ever since then, all my teeth are broken. So I've got bridges, and so that was yesterday. So I apologize for not being around yesterday, and that's why.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine.
Bringing up the dentist, right?
Trauma.
And like I wanted to be the dentist that I never had, and like, you know, to be like, you know, more sensory, you know, focused and stuff like that. But anyway, I didn't want to do that. Then in the 2nd grade, I started to play school. I loved playing school. I would come home. I didn't really like school, but I would play it because I loved being front and center. I loved telling people what to do. I had all my American Girl dolls lined up. It was like
American Girl dolls.
And they would like all like have a book by themselves. They would all get assigned homework. And I just love that teaching that you could just be front and center and tell other people what to do.
I love that.
So it's got nothing to do with teaching. You're just going to be listening to me. I'm your boss.
Yeah.
I'm going to boss you around all day.
Yeah, basically. Yes. And I loved like showing videos, being my creative with my own lessons. And I honestly played school up until, this is so embarrassing, but I did it up until like freshman year of high school.
Right. But that's so interesting though. But you got obviously a good feel out of it, because it's interesting. Brent and I will talk about, like, I still, you know, having to go into the school for even like basketball games, or we had a meeting with a biology teacher, and I still get like sweaty and like uncomfortable, like entering the doors. Like I'm like,
at West Hampton.
Yeah, just any school.
Like, I asked you a question. What did I ask you last week? Something about a school.
No, you said to me, and I fucking tweaked.
Oh yeah, tweaked.
You said, could you ever teach or coach or something? It was something that I was like, I don't really like kids. And I was like, but I said, I don't like kids. I love kids. It is, it's still very like, it brings me back to like not knowing things, and not being able to get out of things that I didn't know, even though I got out of so much. There was like clearly things that like just made me feel so dumb.
Me and learning. People always ask, "What are you doing to further yourself?" I'm like, absolutely nothing. Meaning, a school portion. I'm not going to go back and learn. No, I just. The thought of it. So I'm not going to leave Juliet on an island on the tweaking port. I'm still that way, too.
Yeah. Yeah. It really, it's even like going on college campus, but it's interesting because there is that like we talk about this a lot on the podcast. Like I did get excited for like the beginning of school, and it really was to be with friends, like, right. To be with friends and to play sports there. But there was like the beginning of September as a kid, I got like excited. Now as an adult, like, and it's funny because Brent has seen it, but like, and Dan will be like, yeah, you're an insane person. My anxiety starts going up, and I know that it's because like there's so much to do before school, but there's so much more of it for me. The anxiety of like, oh my God, I just want this kid, like, especially when Montgomery was in school. I was like, I just want him to have a good year. I don't want anyone to fuck with him. Like, I just want it to be okay. And that was a lot of it. But then when he went to college, I was like, oh, I'm going to be fine. This is going to be fine. Like,
but I didn't have any friends either. Colleen. So I want the same thing as you. Obviously I talk of this, I played pro hockey for 18 years. I left with no friends. So I had that friend thing was, I hated school and I didn't have the friends. It was miserable. I didn't connect with anybody. It was, so I know exactly when you're talking about that stuff, I was just cringing over here.
Yeah. Right. And so, it is, there's so many aspects of like why you get that good feeling or not good feeling. And so it's like this weird thing for me because it's like, okay, there was some good things. Like I remember being with my friends and I liked that, but then everything else was such a shit show. So the fact that you like, even there was something in you that wanted to learn, but also be able to, as you said, you wanted to kind of be in the front. But I think it probably was a little bit more of like, you like to learn.
Pay attention to me. Julia, where's your hat? Yeah. I need attention.
My husband I like attention. Oh, okay. My husband got me a hat on one of his business trips. I like attention.
She wears it every day.
I don't need to wear it.
Right. It screams it.
I don't need to wear it because everyone knows my kids will still be like, Ma, it's not about you. How did this come back to you? Everything's always about me. But Montgomery is the same way. I forget something Truman was doing yesterday.
Well, that's a dyslexic trait. Like you find, like my wife's, her childhood crush, the love of her life. She went to, he got traded, plays hockey, Jeremy Roenick. He's the most insecure human, but you'd never know that. Because look at me, the dyslexic side of me here, right? But we do certain things for a reason.
Yeah.
Laughing, if you see over here, you're not asking what's in here.
Right. Well, there is that joke, like the class clowns and stuff like that. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Okay. So you knew in 8th grade, you kind of were like, or 9th, whatever, like you started shifting that you wanted to be a teacher. Cause you said to me that you definitely wanted to be a teacher like for a long time. And it was, and is it, as you also said, you're someone that like, you want to prove people wrong. Was it some of that more? Like take us down that a little bit.
Yeah. So it was also, I also wanted to become a teacher mostly because I always wanted to be the teacher I never had. Like I want my students to come to me when they feel lost, when they feel sad. And I want them to tell me about their goals, not just academic, but also like social, emotional too, because that plays a huge part in learning. Like in college, like when I started to have friends and I was in my, my sorority group and I was doing all of that, my grades started to go up. Like everything, like my self-esteem started to empower. Like I, started to, find out who I really was. And when I was in high school, my grades were very good because I focused a lot of academics because I didn't really have that social portion. Because all you could focus on is academics. And my goal for the 4 years of high school was to just basically get through it and find a great college and rebrand myself basically and to rewrite that story. And to, college was like a big door that opened for me. It really was. And I was so picky about my college experience and where I wanted to go because I needed to rebrand myself and I needed to find that girl group that I never had. And I just needed to start like this brand new chapter in my life because if I can't fall down the same mental rabbit hole that I was back in high school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so take us through like a little bit of High Point.
Yes.
I know I met you, was it your sophomore year?
It was my freshman. It was during COVID when I had such a successful freshman year. I'll never forget it. And then like the pandemic hit and then HBU, they're so funny. They're very like they don't like to follow the technical like college norm. I said, watch, HPU is going to be the only school that's open. All the other schools are going to close. And because I didn't realize how bad COVID was until, it started to happen.
Right.
So anyway, so we met, it was when COVID hit. It was
Right.
just
Okay. Right.
2020, and I had such a successful freshman year and all this other stuff. But anyway, so we found out about High Point through like an education, like consultant that worked with students with learning differences. And she was kind of like, but it was also like I think according to my mom, she kind of also kicked me out because I was very emotional. And I was like, we're not going to like this college and that college. Because a lot of the college also Winston Prep recommended, they were colleges specifically for kids with learning differences. Because that's all Winston Prep knew. They all about Curry, about Dean, Landmark College. Like you probably have heard of these schools too. Like it's the same shit, different day. Like it's all these schools. And I'm like, I'm not going to another college where there's a whole bunch of dyslexics in the room. Like, no, like there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, I don't want to feel labeled again. Like I can't have this label over my head, and I'm too confident. I'm too stubborn. I'm too there has to be more. There's just more than this. So, that's when she recommended a High Point University. And, I really didn't like it at first because, it was very overwhelming. Like there's all the fountains everywhere. It's like our president, Nino Cubain, he's like a motivational speaker. Like you could tell he was like trying to sell the school because he was a businessman. My mom really liked it. And at the time, my mom and I really didn't get along because I was a teenager. And, like who gets along with their mom when you're a teenager?
I know. It's tough. I got 3 teenagers right now.
I know. I can imagine. But anyway, and I was like, Mom, I don't know about this school. Like, it's just like, you like it, so I'm not going to like it.
Right.
100%.
That's my daughter right now. I'm like, Jesus Christ. Right. Right. So that's hard because she probably also was like, but I know this is a good place for you. Right.
Yes. And it had the learning support program too. And like, that's another thing too. I did not want that. I was like, through my entire education career, I don't want to go to somebody just to check in on my academics. Like I know what I'm doing. Even when I was at Winston Prep too, I was very organized. I always had a binder with all of my academic notes in it. I had a planner. I knew when my next test was. I knew when my next quiz. I studied. Like I did what I had to do. And I feel like I just will apply all the skills. I self-advocate for myself, and I'll do that in college. Like nothing. Like I'm too stubborn to be changed. Like I'm doing that. Like
right.
Anyway, and I was like, oh, I don't know. And then I applied to another school in Massachusetts called Holy Cross. It was test optional school. And that was another thing too. I had to look for schools that were test optional because yet again, I'm not a test taker. I took the ACT and the SAT, and like I had to apply to a lot of schools that were test optional. So I went for the interview at Holy Cross. I loved it. It was like my top school. Unfortunately, I didn't get in because it was a very hard school to get into.
That's a hard school. Yeah.
Very hard school to get into. And because I wanted to change myself. I didn't want to I wanted to not dyslexia to be my whole thing. Like I'm not just a student.
Exactly my daughter.
I was just going to say. I was just going to say.
Words. I was trying to get her to go to a small D school, in Wisconsin, just for freshman year, just to learn herself. Ohio State, she's looking at Michigan. I'm like, yeah, she wanted to get lost. She didn't want to be that kid.
Yeah.
And how old is Lila?
22.
Yeah.
Oh, so she's the same age bracket as me.
Yeah. No, but but it's actually really interesting because I know Brent through the years, and that's what he would say, and it's really interesting because Montgomery, like when going to Newberry, and having to do his his accommodations, at first he was like, no. And then he's like, oh, who am I kidding? He's like, I fucking need all of this. He's like, I need all of it. And if I don't have it, I'm not going to be successful. I know I need to do it. But his thing was like, he needed to make sure that he had someone to support him. And it's just a very different, I think it's like a male, female, a little bit male.
I think it's, you guys are stubborn like, and,
he's like, I don't need to do all this myself. I need someone to help me.
I think we're more realistic and you guys,
we make things a little bit more difficult. Females do.
Yeah, we do.
100%.
But also, many schools don't teach executive functioning skills.
No.
That was the thing about Winston Prep too. That's what I loved about the school. It's a very individualized learning, and they taught executive functioning skills.
And that's
At
Southport.
West Hampton Beach, they should teach executive. Even though it's a public school, they should teach executive functioning skills.
Oh, and that's, it brings up to the point of how many teachers, now I'm going to ask you that, being a teacher, even know what those words mean, right? I don't think you even know really what, if you don't struggle with the 5Ds, I really don't think, or haven't found any teachers that really even understand what that word is. So how do you teach something you need to understand yourself? And that's what I talk about teachers is, you want to teach a reading program to a dyslexic, but you know nothing about a dyslexic. How does that make sense?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
And also, I have many teachers too that I've worked with, or I have friends that are becoming teachers too, that they don't even want to work with special ed students. And that's what's also just heartbreaking for me. It's like, yeah, you want to be a teacher, that's great. But if you don't want to work with special ed or understand who they are, then you shouldn't be a teacher in general, because we have more and more students and children coming into the education being diagnosed with something, whether it's dyslexia, whatever it's like anxiety, depression, ADHD, autism, whatever it may be. You need to understand that child. And if you're not willing to learn or to, get another degree or take a class in it or something along those lines, then you shouldn't be a teacher in general, because.
And that stats that I've heard is, 80% of people have something.
Yes.
So now you want to teach the 20%, right? Learning disorders are, 1 in 6 right now. So you're talking.
That's a lot too.
That's a lot. In your classroom, you're talking 30 to 40% of your students have learning disorders, learning differences, call them whatever you want. So now you want to have your cake and eat it too. That's not how this works. And this is why, to me, why the education system is so bad right now, is because they don't care to understand 30 to 40 to 50% of their kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Colleen, I would love to know, did you in the education, like your track, how much did you learn about learning differences, disorders, whatever, 5Ds? Like how much did they bring into at High Point?
So we learned a lot about the reading programs, and we learned a lot about reading the testing too of what North Carolina does in order for a student to be tested with a learning difference such like dyslexia. So I remember doing a pro reading program called Dibbles. It's what they use in North Carolina. It's
My
their
mom's
reading program.
Yeah, my mom actually knows dibbles. I remember being a kid being like, what are you saying? Dribbles? Dibble? What? Drool? What? Yeah. Okay.
So we learned about that. And then we learned about the writing program, the Judith Hoffman method. So we learned about that as a writing program as well. And then we learned also Dibbles also has a math program as well. So if a student, is suspected of a learning difference, they would go through that reading and math program. And then we learned a lot about touch math too, a lot of the math programs as well, how to use a proper math manipulative, how to use also a reading manipulative as well, how to encode, decode. And we learned a lot of those programs, but we didn't learn, which I feel I still keep in touch with my professors. And so I talk to my professors all the time, how to help a child. Because I believe when you have dyslexia, there's also a mental, I also suffer with a lot of anxiety, how to help that as well. Because I believe we should teach children as a whole, not just by academics, teach them how to hand manage their anxiety, how to make friends, how to navigate through that whole stuff. And that's what they don't teach too. It's not just, you can't teach to a test anymore. And that's why, as Juliet says, the education system is so broken, because
they don't have it, so they don't understand.
Yeah, exactly.
So to your point, that's, again, for the foundation, my number one thing is self-esteem. I don't care about what reading program. I don't care what math program. I don't care what you have. If you have no self-esteem, and I don't have any self-esteem when it comes to school, comes to teachers, right? Because of what you just said, you're still talking to professors, right? They're missing a whole boat. They don't have it. So that's the portion that we don't get. And that's what we talk about here on a daily basis. Every time we record there's no understanding of us. None.
Yeah. it breaks my heart. It really does. And if you don't understand where the children are coming from, then how are you going to create that relationship with your student? And that's with you. When you're a teacher, you're in the front of center. That's why I loved playing school, because you were front and center. You get to create those relationships with your students.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
You got to get that hat made. Foundation hat. I love attention.
I'm not a baseball hat wearer, so I have to find it because Dan, I forget when he gave it to me.
Next podcast, you got to put it on.
I'll put it on. Right.
I want to find one too. I found one off of Etsy or something. Yeah. We'll wear it.
Yeah, we'll both wear it. Yeah. Well, but so Colleen, and I know we're up at an hour, but I want to give another few minutes to this, because I think it's really important. And I think you came, again, we can make this a 5-hour podcast because there's so much to unpack. I mean, first of all, because we 100% understand everything that you've been through. And we're also fascinated with the college route and where you are now. So, as I've said, this whole year that we've been texting, I know that there's things for you to kind of fill in for the foundation. I know you've been saying, hey, I want to be able to help. I want to be able to help.
You're definitely going to be brought into helping. So let me just
I help in any way possible. Anyway.
Well, and I knew that you guys would connect and have that familiarity. I think that's the word. Familiarness. I should say. I can't speak today. But there's one of the things that I think the executive functioning thing I think is huge, because we've talked about that a million times. Everyone can benefit from learning executive functioning. It's not that's not a hard thing to do. That is something that really should be focused on. But then you're teaching now. So take us through a little bit of that to kind of just touch on it. And how are you finding it? Are you finding that you're being able to connect with those students that you got into teaching to do? Are you finding it frustrating? Tell us a little bit about that.
So I teach at a private school in the city called Academics West. It's a therapeutic special education school. So I have a total of 5 students, and they all have a learning difference, and they also have an emotional, whether that's anxiety, depression. That's what they also have. And I love that I can incorporate those two. I could teach in a social and emotional learning program into my lessons. And that's what many private schools, public schools, you can't do, because you have to get through the standards and you have to get through all this other baloney, and you can't teach that. And I love that I get to, teach that. I was teaching a lesson on self-advocacy and the importance of I don't believe in homework. I have to give homework because of what administration, but I don't really give a lot. But I was telling my students, once, if you don't understand a math question, it's so important to email me. So we did a lesson on self-advocacy, how to write an email to your teacher, what to say, and then, once I applied all those skills, they did a practice one. And then I remember a couple of days later, I got an email from my student saying, hi, Ms. Coppola, I don't understand this math homework question. Can we go over it tomorrow morning? And once they apply those skills, and, I love that. That made my whole year already, because, I taught them something and they did it.
Right. And I love that. Again, that's not 100%. That's amazing. It's knowledge is powerful. They can't advocate. And that says, if you can't advocate for yourself, you don't understand yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I love that I do have a small class, so I am able to understand their needs. And, if I go to a public school and teach, if I have 21 kids, that's going to be hard for me to establish those relationships. And although I totally want to, and I will, but I love that, in my early years of teaching, that I have the smaller class sizes, and they're all boys too, might I add. Mm-hmm. So I'm a boy teacher.
Hang on a second. So it's easier, right? A lot less drama. We punch each other in the face, and it's over, right?
Yeah. Or they say it at recess. Recess is when you start seeing their personalities develop. When there's a basketball game and competitive starts, I'm going to take you downtown, as they say.
Right.
No.
Oh yeah, and then it's over. It's done with. We don't.
And that's why I love to say, we use our words if we're frustrated, guys. Let's not get physical or anything. Use our words.
Yeah.
Well, we do the same thing. Boys beat up boys. Boys say things, but we don't hang on to it. So in your classroom, obviously, do you allow? Because I talk about this all the time. kids got ADHD or whatever, if they need to stand up and spin in the corner, are they hurting anybody? No, but he needs to sit. Why? Is he disturbing anybody? If he's disturbing someone, 100%, but we have to teach him. So why not put him by the window, on the side, they can stand up. And I have teachers argue with me all the time. He has to sit. Well, he can't. So why can't he do that? Do you allow that in your classroom?
I do allow a lot of movement breaks. Let's say we get through math. Okay, like for 10 minutes, they can have a movement break. There's also there's a lot of clinicians, like social workers that I work with the school, and they call them on call. So what it is, if a student needs to talk to somebody, they can. Mm-hmm. They can talk about what they're going through, and if there's any challenges that went on at home or at school, they can they feel free to talk to somebody. But I do a lot of movement breaks. They love to sing and they love to dance. So if they love to sing and dance, why not? It's comical for me. Honestly.
Right.
I'm the best singer. My wife calls me, dying raccoon.
I was going to say, I love the confidence in the singing there.
Yeah. Me? Nice.
So good.
The mistletoe.
Colleen, I think that's one of the things. And when Brent says, we give teachers a hard time, it's really that the teachers are not giving the tools to be able to do what they need to do. And so it's the overall arching of the system, right? It's you're not teaching, as you said, they're not teaching exactly what it is. And so when people think of learning differences, or they think of kids with issues, they think of a kid that's going to be so disruptive, they're not going to be able to take, so their teachers are not being given the tools to be able to put it, especially in public school, especially with huge classes.
And a lot of them don't want to, as you were first. And that's the ones where I get angry. And that's the ones I hate, that I always say I want to punch, the ones that don't want to.
Right. That go into it for that. But it is a thing. Brent knows this, and I think Colleen, I probably shared it with you. My mom was a kindergarten teacher, and one of the things, anytime I would ever go into her classroom, kids would be all over the place, but they would all be listening to what she was doing, but she didn't make them sit down, right? They're, 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. Who wants to sit? I know the way I learn best is when I'm moving, I'm sitting for long periods of time. No one should be doing that. No one. So the fact that you acknowledge it, but also because you understand. Mm-hmm. And so if you could give a teacher that is going into teaching that doesn't have understanding, a little bit of advice of kind of grasping that understanding, what would be one thing that you would say to them?
I would say, just listen to your students. Just see where they're coming from. I would say that. Just listen. Just be an open ear. Just, know that, be the teacher that they can talk to, whatever they feel. Just listen and just see where they're coming from. If they want to get up and stretch, let them get up and stretch. You don't know what happened the day before, if they didn't get enough sleep, or because that impacts a lot too. Mm-hmm. Those
you should see Juliet when she doesn't get enough sleep.
Well, that's why I haven't gotten enough sleep the last couple of days.
So not even a kid, but a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kid, almost a 51-year-old woman.
Yeah, it does me in. It's so bad. I used to be so good with no sleep, and now I'm literally like a moron. But I love that. And, as I said, we could go on, but I'm sure we're going to have you back. As I said, I know you two were going to connect, and I know from here, there's going to be a lot of things as the foundation is growing and we have more we know exactly where we want to go. There's so many things that I can see you helping and giving knowledge.
Thank you for having me. This is an honor to be on, and on Christmas Eve, it's snowing. Wow, this is a magical day.
It is a magical day. It is a magical day. So thank you again for joining Word Blindness Dyslexia Exposed. And you guys, I say it every single time. Brent giggles, but rate, review, and share. You don't know who needs to hear this. You don't know who is in a similar situation as Colleen, as a mom, as a kid, as a teacher, as an educator. This episode you don't have to be dyslexic. You don't have to be in education, but someone that is going through something like this, and this episode can help. So don't forget to rate, review, and share. Thanks again. And we'll see you next week.